2, 1.
Well, hello. Guy Page and Paul Bean for another episode. First episode of our second full year, Paul, of VDC TV's podcast Friday at 4. Glad to have you. How you doing, Paul?
Pretty good. How about you, Guy?
All right. Doing good. It's as we say, another week in the can. It's been another long, exciting news week, and it really started. It started Saturday morning.
Yeah.
When actually I should say Saturday about 1 o'clock in some of the worst hypothermia weather that I have ever been out in. Freezing cold, drizzly, windy. I hope no one really had problems with hypothermia, but on the State House lawn, a huge rally, an anti-Trump rally is the best way to put it, hands-off rally.
Yeah.
And someone who some people might think to be an unlikely speaker was our Republican Lieutenant Governor, John Rodgers. Roll it.
Sure.
As a Republican who supports women's rights, the LGBTQ community, local farmers and loggers, our manufacturers and other great Vermont businesses, the free press, the United States Constitution, and the rule of law, I'm appalled at what the Trump administration is doing to our state and our country. This needs to be all of us working together to make the Republicans in Congress grow some courage. In 1859, Abraham Lincoln would articulate the ideology of the Republican Party, defining it as the party of ordinary Americans standing together against the oligarchs of slavery. They have forgotten their founding fathers, and we need to return to Lincoln Republicans. I am embarrassed by the lack of courage shown by the Republicans in Congress. I may not agree with Liz Cheney on everything, but she has more courage than all of the congressional Republicans put together. It is time that the Republicans in Congress stand up for their constituents instead of following the will of their president. At the same time, President Trump and his administration violate the laws and the Constitution on a regular basis. This is unacceptable. It is also unacceptable that big law firms are caving into his will. These spineless law firms are another prime example of the lack of courage that has infected so many who should be standing up for the rights of Americans and the Constitution. As I understand it, I am the only Republican across the entire country with the courage to stand up, and I am calling on all Republicans to stand up.
John? Wow.
As a Republican who supports...
So, Paul, John was on our show a lot.
Yeah.
Last year.
He was.
He eked out a victory over progressive Democrat Dave Zuckerman.
Just barely.
Yeah. What do you make of what you just heard, Paul Bean?
Well, I think it's really sad. I think it's really sad. And I just want to give a message to John, if you're out there listening, James, if you're out there listening, Chief of Staff. That rally I mentioned that I would be there on Saturday, I said on the show last week that I was going to go. And usually I'm a man of my word, and when I say I'm going to be somewhere, I'm there. But I actually made the decision not to go for a number of reasons, but the biggest reason being, I don't want to go and cause trouble and just be there around a group of people that, I'm not going to like what they're going to be saying. And honestly, I really didn't want to bring more attention to the fact that John Rodgers was going to be there. I think that the reality is that so many people that saw that clip, right? I think they were shocked, right? I was shocked. And just to say quickly, folks, if you are out there viewing, we want your comments. We don't want this just to be a show about what we're saying, because most of you probably already know what we think to a certain degree. We want to hear your takes and your thoughts and your concerns about what you just saw. And to be fair to John, that's not the whole clip. There is an entire 8-minute speech out there where he does discuss some of his concerns with tariffs, but that's not the problem that I have. If John went up there and said, hey, I really don't like what these tariffs are doing to Vermont. I'm concerned. I don't care about if it's a short-term loss for a long-term gain. We don't have space for that right now in Vermont. We don't have that. We can't deal with that. But you didn't say that. You got up there and you crapped all over the Republican Party. And Donald Trump, you know, and to be fair, you know, Donald Trump, you can criticize Donald Trump. I wouldn't have a problem with that either. But you took it so far to bring up Liz Cheney. That is just like, if you know anything about Republicans, which I guess maybe you do, right? MAGA Republicans especially, you know that Liz Cheney is like, you don't go there, man. Like,
The
why?
ultimate black sheep of the Republican Party.
Ultimate black sheep of the Republican Party. And for somebody who just became a Republican to be talking about real Republicans,
Right.
it's hilarious. Honestly, it is funny. But the problem that I have is, you know, John, I think a lot of people really were excited about you. We believed in you. We were excited that we had somebody that was going to be a leader of the Republican Party who could really bring the people that were like that MAGA end of the Republican Party together with the people who really doesn't support Trump. And the fact is, nobody had a problem with the fact that you didn't support Trump. You know that the party was very weak. You know that we needed a statewide candidate, and we thought, here's a guy we can put our faith and trust in. He's going to unify the party. He's not going to divide us further. He's going to create a real opposition to this oligarchy that exists in Vermont. You know, but no, instead he decided to try to drive the wedge, which honestly I think all he did was ostracize himself from the Vermont Republican Party. Because I think he's miscalculating, and I say he's miscalculating, maybe his team's miscalculating, you know.
Right.
You think that you're the only person that's going to run for a primary in this 2026 elections, where Republicans feel like for the first time ever in my life that there's actually an oppositional force, right? You think you're the only person who wants to run? There's this momentum going this direction, and you think you're the only one. I think there's a number of people out there that want to be a lieutenant governor that are Republican, myself included. No, just kidding. I'm not. Listen, if push comes to shove, I will run. I will run. Putting it out there, I'll run. Why not? Why not?
Okay.
You know, we're not going to be shackled to this former way of thinking, this Republican tradition in Vermont, to betray the entire base. It's so wrong. What you just did was so wrong. And it was hurtful. And that's the issue aside. The issue aside of tariffs. You could have said something way better. And I mean, I might have still taken issue with it, but I wouldn't be as upset as I am. There's a reason why I didn't go. When people started sending me, like, oh, here's a portion of what he said, and it wasn't videos, it was just quotes. And I was like, no, he didn't say that. Oh, come on, no way. Are you just saying different things to different people when you're in one room, you say one thing to another? I know all politicians talk out of both sides of their mouth, but in 2025, cameras are on all the time, man. You've come on to my show.
Right.
I feel like it was the biggest betrayal. I mean, one of the biggest betrayals I've ever experienced. And it's like I've been frustrated. I've been mad. You also both know that going into it, that Guy Page and Paul Bean are going to sit down and have a conversation about this specifically. So you're getting the reaction that I guess maybe you wanted, but I don't think it helps you. I really don't. I think you made a big mistake.
Right.
But I'll stop ranting. I could go all day. Yeah.
No.
Yes. Thanks
no,
for giving us.
I mean, really, no.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Folks, if there's ever a show where we want a third member in this group sitting here with us virtually and weighing in and telling us what you think, it's this show. So if you're watching and you have a thought, whether you agree with Paul, whether you agree with John, whatever your thoughts on this, please put them in the chat. How do they do that, Paul? If they're watching on Facebook, they comment?
Just like you'd comment on anything else, just write it below. I know Vermont Daily Chronicle readers know how to comment, but if you're new to us or you're watching on X or you just stumbled upon us, feel free to join in the conversation. We do have a couple comments already. Here's Kevin Ryan, Mouth Almighty. He says, "Hey, Paul and Guy, there was a cold wind blowing at the State House last Saturday. What we saw was enough." Okay. Jerry Zeller writes, "I should have gone."
I want to talk to that.
Sure, go ahead.
Sure. Kevin, you're absolutely right. When you and I met on State Street a couple years ago, actually, it was about 10 feet from where I was standing, where I ended up last Saturday when I was shooting some video. I only went down to that thing and shot the video I did because I'd just been to the post office box, and I figured, well, I'll walk down to the bank and make a deposit. And I'm walking, and suddenly I hear these streams of people all heading down, and one of the biggest crowds that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And so credit to the people who turned out for this, because wow, was the weather ever terrible. So you said there was another one, Paul?
Yes, we have a comment from Jerry Zeller. Jerry writes, "I should have gone with my first thoughts. From now on, I will. This proves that lying to one's face is acceptable these days to get an end result." And that is what it comes down to. It's a matter of principles. To be fair to John, he never said he supported Donald Trump.
See, this is an important point.
It is.
We had this idea that, well, he was our guy, the Republicans among us. He was our guy in the election, and he took out David Zuckerman. Yahoo! And at the same election, Donald Trump won. And so we're thinking, wow, the red wave. Well, yes, it was a red wave, but really in Vermont, a purple wave.
Yeah.
And you have a lieutenant governor and a governor who are both, have pretty consistently said, not big fans of the chief executive. He surprised me. John Rodgers surprised me 2-3 weeks ago after a press conference. He made some comment about Donald Trump suppressing free speech or freedom of the press. And I said, John, what are you talking about? Free speech. Here's a president who, if nothing else, is inviting the press into the Oval Office during cabinet meetings. Come on. And holds these long press conferences. And he's so incredibly available to the press. But what he said was, well, you have he sued, I think it was NBC or MSNBC, for defamation because they called him a rapist. And which, as it turns out, they settled that. He won that one. And then John said, well, and he's also cutting the funding for the Voice of America. The Voice of America is essentially you could say, the government propaganda arm. It was already going to be teaching. As Tim pointed out to me a couple of weeks ago, this is really just Tim talking through my mouth. Voice of America was always going to be doing what the government wanted it to say. So you really can't talk about freedom of the press when you're talking about the Voice of America, as worthy as an organization as that is. It's not exactly that they're going to be adversarial to the government. They're part of the government. And the other thing that a lot of people bring up is this Associated Press has been kicked out of the Oval Office gatherings. Not the big press meetings, but the Oval Office, the small gaggle in the press. And yeah, okay, and there was actually a court case about that, and it's because they wouldn't call it the Gulf of America and all that. But if there's one thing that, Paul, you and I have learned in our combined years of journalism and government, is that what the government figures do is if we like you, we will give you access. If we don't like you, we won't give you access. For example, there are representatives who will always talk to me about anything because they realize that, I'm probably somewhat biased to their side. Okay, I admit it. At least I admit it, right?
Yeah, transparency.
Right. And there are others who look at me like, the golem or the Wendigo is stalking them. It's like, oh, I don't want to talk to this guy. And because they think that I'm going to be unfair or whatever, I don't think I am. But the point is, access. If you like the media, give them access. If you don't give them access. That's a pretty old, reliable standard for government press relations. So the people who are complaining, oh no, AP, end of freedom of the press, I'm not sure that really works. And the other thing, this is the thing that people don't know about Associated Press. There was a Chinese communications firm that is big on spying and electronic devices. It's Hua or something like that. I forget the name. Governor Scott actually called them out a few years ago. And they put devices in sensitive places so they can hear things. This is what they do. What was the one U.S. media organization that had a business connection with this group? Oh, that would be the Associated Press. So, not that he said as much, but I wouldn't blame Donald Trump or his press secretary or his chief of staff for saying, we're not sure we want an organization that is connected with a Chinese operation that specializes in hidden listening devices in the Oval Office. Right?
Yeah.
So, and this all came out in Tom Cotton's book, 7 Things That They Won't Tell You About China. It came out last year sometime. So, I don't think, John, I don't agree with you that Trump has been infringing on freedom of the press or freedom of speech. He doesn't like them, but that's not the same thing as shutting them up, which is what, frankly, the Biden administration was all about.
Well, and it's the same. It's what the people that you're emboldening in that group of people in front of you, you're speaking to. What you're emboldening is a group of people that would love to silence Guy Page and I.
Yep.
Would love to not let us have a platform or a place to speak.
Hey, when we were shut down on Facebook, et cetera, did anyone complain?
No.
No. When Steve Merrill was taking off of the Governor Scott's list of approved media on his press conferences, his COVID press conferences, did anyone but me complain? No. Because it's sort of like, well, they're one of those. Well, I will be doing the Chronicle. If I get cut off digitally, I've got a printer and I've got a Royal typewriter. My Aunt Phyllis's Royal typewriter. And I've got typing paper, darn it. I'm going to go.
We're not going anywhere.
And, well, no, we're not. But, and the point is, whatever medium we need, we will use. But when the government is all about sort of shutting off voices, that's a really concerning thing. And I don't at all see Trump doing that. And I did see that in the previous administration.
And I think when I ran for office in 2022, I was advised by some folks, basically, like if somebody who you thought was with you or is not with you, you just if they betray you or they let you down, just move on, keep going. And I think for John, who thinks he's emboldened as this leader of the Republican Party, he thinks that we're all going to fall in line with him. Maybe I don't think he actually thinks that to a certain degree, but. Why should we have to go down that path?
Right.
Why should the future of Vermont continue to be Republicans compromising with Democrats? Why is that the heritage? Right? Shouldn't have to be.
I'll be speaking tomorrow at a bunch of sort of conservative Republicans down in Ludlow tomorrow, and it'll be interesting to see what sort of response people have to John and to that whole idea in general. Be very interesting. Paul, we probably should do a commercial.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good idea. Okay. Today's episode is brought to you by Procter Gas. Are you a homeowner?
Procter Gas. I'm going to be seeing Judy tomorrow in Ludlow.
Oh, there you go.
Judy Taranovich, and she said she has a hat for me. Right, Judy? Okay.
Let us know in the comments.
Yes.
Are you a homeowner wishing to convert your home to propane gas so you can enjoy energy efficiency and off-grid living? Alternatively, you may be a contractor seeking propane tank and line installation and related services for your clients. Either way, our propane company is here to help. We provide comprehensive services in a variety of products from leading brands in Rutland and beyond. Procter Gas, based out of Proctor, Vermont, right, Guy?
That's right. He said, and that's where we have roots, not just branches.
That's right.
That'd be one of their sayings.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So here's a comment on the situation from somebody I think you might know, Timothy Page. He says, I don't agree with how he said what he said, but should we really be putting him down for standing up for his beliefs and being honest, even if he doesn't agree with us? Personally, I think that with Scott being definitively not a rhino, I hate that term, this session, I have to wonder if John is doing this to balance out the equation. That way, we have at least the image of moderacy. Maybe. There could be something to that. I will say you're definitely right. Phil Scott's take on some of this stuff. I mean, I'm looking forward to his next press conference. I'd be curious to see if Governor Scott does agree with what John Rodgers said. I mean, I can already think of his answer. He's going to say something like, well, I don't wholly agree with him, but I maybe do a little bit. Something like that, to that effect, is my guess.
Right. Tim, moderacy, you are a marvel of alliteration. I've never heard that word before.
Moderacy. This is
Anyway.
comment from Kevin Ryan, Mouth Almighty. If you join a team, stay on your team. You can have differences, but what Rodgers did was a real gouge at Republicans. And that's I think, like, it's not the issue of tariffs. Like, we can debate tariffs.
Yeah.
We can talk about that all day if you want. And I'm going to argue in favor of them. I think that we should talk more about that as well.
Yeah, I agree.
But that's not what this is about. It's the fact that you felt like you had to do that and just crap all over people that supported you. And there's a lot of young Republicans out there, such as myself, that live in Vermont and all over the state, that I'm sorry, what you just said was too far. Believe it or not, MAGA is actually pretty popular with the younger generations. So, and I know I'm just generalizing saying that, but I could back that up with stats.
I wonder if maybe there's a political calculation here, besides the fact that John is famous for kind of speaking his mind, and maybe he just kind of spoke his mind. But could there also be a political calculation here where he's saying, I want to win the 26th election, and whether it's for governor or lieutenant governor, probably lieutenant governor, because I think Governor Scott's going to run again. And then it's really just a question of, can I beat whoever the Democrat is? Can I beat David Zuckerman? Can I beat someone of the stature of Charity Clark or Mike Piechek, who I think actually is probably their best shot for governors, Mike Piechek, if you ask me.
For sure.
Yeah.
And at this point, what's the difference between John Rodgers and Mike Piechek? I'd be curious, right?
Their style is certainly very different.
Style is very different. One of them calls themselves a Republican. The other guy calls himself a Democrat.
Right.
I believe one of them is a Democrat. I think the other one is too. But we'll see.
There's a saying that a good politician is someone who, while being chased out of town by an angry mob, can make it look as if he's leading a parade. And Mike is really good at that. And John, I'm not so sure. So who would but let's say he's thinking, look, the real challenge here is the general election, and I need to broaden my appeal to speak in front of thousands of people who are then going to tell thousands of other people about this great Republican, John Rodgers, and yes, we can vote for him. When I was in his office just about an hour and a half ago, James Ellers, his chief of staff, was listening to the messages, and one of them was someone saying, I was at the rally, and I just want to say that's really great. You're the only Republican who's saying these things. So this clearly, he's picking up some support like from that crowd. Now, how badly would this hurt him in a primary? And who would that be against? I mean, I can imagine folks like Greg Thayer might run again. He's done it before. But would a Joe Benning want to be running?
I've heard of that before too. I heard he might be interested in doing that. But I mean, the reality is like, look, if you're the lieutenant governor, it's kind of it's kind of a worthless position. I mean, it's not a worthless position. It's a statewide position. It's a hard thing to win. But, you have a few different functions, but your power is pretty limited.
There's not a lot of executive power there. It's no slouch presiding over the Senate.
No.
It's actually pretty hard to do.
I could see that.
But it's not like you're making big decisions like the governor is every day.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say is like, if John wants to be the lieutenant governor and win the Republican nomination and be the lieutenant governor again, go ahead, I guess. But, I mean, what everybody's after is the governorship, right? So, like, as far as I'm concerned, somebody else is probably going to make a strong primary against him. And
Right.
and that's the point.
Who?
Is
Paul,
I don't.
who do you think?
I've heard of some names. I've heard Russ Engels thrown around. I've heard
Now, who's Russ Engels?
Senator from Caledonia. No, what town is? Where is he from? Caledonia.
I think technically
Essex?
he's the Essex County.
Essex County.
Yeah.
So I've also heard Scott Beck mention senator from Caledonia
Whoa.
County. I've
That's
also,
interesting.
I know these are all just rumors, folks. Don't say,
Yeah.
"Oh, Paul Bean said so; it must be true." But I've heard that, and I've also heard Joe Banning too. A handful of other names have kind of been tossed around.
Yeah.
But I do know that. Look, if somebody wanted to be the lieutenant governor, all you have to do is just come in a little bit south of John on the rhetoric towards Republicans, and then you actually might make a pretty good candidate going into the general election still.
Yeah.
That would be my advice. I think John just went way too far to the point where it's like, dude, you alienated people that really looked up to you, like genuinely looked up to you.
Right.
And then you just did that. And the question is like, I thought John was doing a really good job. Like, I had no concerns about him. I thought he was just playing it cool. He was doing the right things, low profile, nothing crazy, just being a good guy, listener, what people wanted from lieutenant governor. It was not about party. It wasn't about party. It really wasn't until you made it about the party. And I don't know what changed with him. I don't know where he's getting his advice from. But it seems to me like somebody wanted to destroy the party, right? Somebody wanted to divide as many people as possible. And I mean, when Phil Scott did something similar years back with that gun bill,
Right.
they successfully divided the party. Now, am I saying that was what Phil Scott's intention was? No. He wanted to be the governor again, and I think it solidified him as governor for another few years. But I guess that's what I'm just trying to get at. It's like, look, man, you got to make choices, and if you can look at yourself in the mirror and say the things that you're going to say, then by all means, go ahead.
Right.
But don't expect people to just ride or die with you based on that. I mean, I can't defend. That's the problem. Is like you put me in a position where I can't defend what you're saying. Like the Second Amendment thing when he was talking about guns way back during the when he told us he said something to the effect of like, I'm trying to thread a needle here in this debate, and I think maybe did he think we were going to have his back like that, and give him the opportunity to just go along. It's like, look, you can't embolden that crowd of people that you're talking to like that and expect us to just go along with you, because those people, in my opinion, that group of people, that's the real problem with Vermont. You guys are talking all about oligarchy and all this different stuff and how Trump's increasing the cost of living, and that's yet to be seen, by the way.
Right.
Meanwhile, what
That's
we
a good
are
point.
experiencing is a state legislature that forces Vermonters to carry the third largest tax burden in the nation, of which you have been part of, by the way. You were in the legislature for the last 20 plus years. Yep. I'm not going to say you haven't been standing up for Vermonters, because I know you have been. He absolutely has been. You can't take that away from John Rodgers. He's spoken to the issues and the things that matter, and I think that's why he was a successful campaign. He had a successful campaign. But I think at this point, you just went so far. It's just like, why?
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
We do have some comments if you want me to,
Please.
to rattle some off.
Comments
right
are these are the best.
VT Gal says, John needs to stop watching MSNBC. Okay. That's a good question. I don't know if he is. If he isn't, maybe some of his friends are. I don't know.
That's like Rachel Maddow's territory, right?
That's Rachel Maddow, yeah.
The MSNBC is probably the furthest left of the cable news stations.
It's funny you say that. Even CNN has gotten better lately.
They have.
They've gotten a lot better. And I think it's because people are realizing, like, it can't just be you got to tell the truth. You can't it can't be all propaganda.
Well, you can certainly lie and not tell the truth if you think it might help you win a presidential election. But once that possibility isn't there anymore, well, might as well get back to our old principles.
So here's a comment from Michael Hall. He says, "Gone are the days of being a true Republican or Democrat. People today will claim to be whatever the party they think will get them elected." That's the issue that I have. That's the problem that I have. I completely agree with you, Michael.
Yeah.
It's so principleless. Here you are just shape-shifting to whatever fits your mold to get you into the position that you want to be in. And you're going to
The strange thing is that is so... Maybe a part of the visceral reaction here is that's the last thing anyone would have ever thought that they'd be thinking about John Rodgers.
Yeah.
Because he's always been a pretty plain-spoken, this is what I think kind of guy. And maybe he that's exactly what he's doing. It's just, to us, it just sort of seems kind of dissonant that we didn't think he thought those things.
I didn't think he thought that.
Yeah.
And I still don't think he thinks that. I don't think he thinks that. I think he's saying the things he thinks he needs to say to win some votes from the middle. But you didn't win by that big of a margin for the lieutenant governor, so you just sacrificed a huge group of people that would vote for you.
Right.
So I still have a hard time even believing that you actually think the things that you said in the speech. I mean, maybe some of the stuff about trade, there were some things you said about trade, and I do believe you would take issue with the things that you were saying. And that's fair. Like, it's okay. But there are other things you said that I don't believe came from John Rodgers. Right. I don't believe for a second.
Could be.
And also, I think it's sad, too, because I believe he's contributed to a more positive atmosphere at the State House this year. I think he's really made the place a better place to be, and he made people just like happier to be there, honestly.
Right. Huh.
I think people across party lines really respected him. Some people, of course, in the Democratic Party are never going to. Some people in the Republican Party maybe never will either. But it's unfortunate.
Now, I'm not sure before Saturday I would have said that about Republicans, but I think now he may have that problem. What else we got?
Well, here we go. This is a great point from Kevin Ryan. He says, "There's 11 people here." This is on YouTube. Just so you know, we stream elsewhere too, Kevin.
Yes, we do.
You know.
Thanks, Kevin.
There's 11 people here. Slam that like button. He is right. Slam that like button, folks. Hit that like button. Please comment. Please subscribe. Please do all the things that would share our message and make it louder and amplifies our viewership and voice. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
Jerry Zeller writes, "He has an ulterior motive. Beware," sounds like he is going for top. I hit the like, it didn't register on my end. Kevin also says, "VDC doesn't need Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, and X can give you large audience." You know, we are on X,
right?
We're on X. We're on my profile, and we're on the Chronicles
What's
profile.
all about Rumble? I don't really get Rumble.
Well, let's hear more about it. I get Rumble. It's probably like the conservative YouTube.
Okay.
And I think he is right, but we want to have people find us still. I mean, YouTube's the biggest platform on planet Earth,
right.
So that's kind of hard for me to. I mean, Rumble's.
Well, I wouldn't say no to YouTube.
Yeah, no. Rumble's good, but we're going to work on that. We should get a Rumble going for us. I agree. Thank you, Kevin, for writing that in. Huh. Committeeman Josh Beckhofer writes, "Democrats instructed the FBI to censor conservative media on Facebook, Twitter at the time, etc. It's a mystery as to what John Rodgers is really thinking he'll ever accomplish. Maybe he's really a true believer." True believer. When you say true believer, just clarify. I'm pretty sure what he means is a true believer in like the Bernie.
Well, Josh, tell us what you mean. That's an interesting thought. And his main point, his fact point there is absolutely right, which is the Democrats were all about actually suppressing free speech on social media, as in canceling, you're gone.
Yeah.
And that's just unforgivable to me. And the Republicans did not do that. Donald Trump is not doing that. So kudos to him for that.
This is a comment from Jeff Baines. He writes, "It's a uniparty of corruption. Both sides are working together to screw the taxpayers. They have a unification cult of sorts. They are all sellouts." What he's referring to is what I referred to as the oligarchy of Vermont. They're out there. And I've been saying we're going to dig into this, and we're going to name names eventually. We're just waiting until we dot our T's or dot our I's and cross our T's.
That's it.
You know, we don't want to just start calling people out without facts. But you're speaking some truth here. There is a group of people in the state that I do believe are manipulating on both ends of the political spectrum. The same people, in my opinion, that would fund Phil Scott are the same people that would fund a Mike Pichek, in my opinion. So that's just my opinion, though. That's yet to be determined. We'll figure that out, and we'll explain it thoroughly when the time comes. But there's more to that question, I think, than folks realize. Kevin continues, "Folks, hitting that like button helps the channel and Paul and Guy. It does. Hit the like button wherever you're watching this. If you're watching this on X, please repost it. That helps us massively, massively, massively. If you repost it, that just gets more people viewing it, more people see it. That's a huge help. So if you're watching on X, please do that. Zuckerman, this is Jerry Zeller as well. He says, Zuckerman did the same exact thing about Republicans during an interview. Well, I don't know. You'll have to confirm with what you're referring to on that.
But he was basically saying, oh, that's interesting. So the same content that John Rodgers was saying, David Zuckerman also was saying?
I think that's what he's saying. It's
question?
Like the same kind of Bernie, or same kind of Donald Trump talking points.
All right.
Kevin Ryan at Mouth Almighty says, Rodgers will not get through the primary at this point. Yeah, I mean, unless he retracts, if he retracts maybe his statements, but even then, I think people are really going to struggle to trust him.
And again, that's a strange thing, because I would never have thought that one of John Rodgers' problems would be trust.
Me neither.
And I do think that, rightly or wrongly, he now, with some Republican voters, he's got a trust problem.
I would say it's nearly all of them. Because I would argue that the MAGA shift, even in Vermont, people might say, oh, there's not a big shift happening here for Trump. And arguably that is true, arguably. But it's definitely more pro-Trump than it ever has been. So that whole conversation that, these MAGA voters or the Republicans, I think most Republicans are probably upset by what he had to say, because he didn't just attack Donald Trump. He attacked all Republicans.
Yeah.
He said all the Republicans in Congress better stand up and grow some courage.
Right.
It's like you're just talking about all the constituents, the voters of the United States of America. You're talking about most people in the country.
So unless you're Liz Cheney.
Yeah. Which is just,
Who, by the way, is not in office. She was primaried, I think, in 24, I think.
Well, she's got courage for that.
Yeah.
This is from Jeff Baines. He
Viennes.
says, Viennes. Sorry, Jeff. I knew that. I'm sorry. I just read it quick. He says, I ran for Ron Paul the year they changed the voting rules to you could vote, but it doesn't count until you're a Vermont Republican for at least 5 years. It was a joke. I quit. They changed the rules to remove any problem people who were truthing. Can you translate? I think I know what he means.
Read it again.
I ran for Ron Paul the year they changed the voting rules to you could vote, but it doesn't count until you're a Vermont Republican for at least 5 years. It was a joke. I quit. They changed the rules to remove any problem people who were truthing.
So, Jeff, first of all, thank you for your strong support and readership of Vermont Daily Chronicle.
Yes.
Thank you, Jeff.
Definitely.
And I'm a little unclear as to sort of the history here and what it is you're trying to say.
As a delegate. That's what he says.
Oh, you ran as a delegate.
I think that's what he must mean.
All right.
He's talking about when maybe Ron Paul tried to change some rules, that you had to be 5 years as a Vermont Republican before you could be a delegate.
Oh, that could be, I suppose. And I don't know what the rules are now, but he's saying that he basically he was on the wrong side and he got X'd out, it sounds like.
Stu Lindbergh writes, educating the public on how to fix pressing Vermont problems versus truth bashing. And I think that's like the core of my issue too, that I take with what Rodgers is doing. It's like what you're trying to do is capitalize on the rage, on the frustration,
Right.
on the anger, all emotions that are really negative, and the fear and the anxiety. All emotions that are really negative, and all in history emotions that have been used to manipulate people, right? When you look at Nazi Germany, why are those people making the choices that they make? It's because they live in fear of their government, right? These people, they're fearful, but they're fearful for the wrong reasons, and they're fearful of the wrong people. And you're doing the disingenuous thing by emboldening them, and you are lying to them, basically. I mean, maybe you really do believe it. Maybe you are a true believer. Maybe you're a true believer. That's Joshua's point. That's what his point is.
Okay.
But
Probably good time for another ad, Paul.
yes, definitely. Okay. Today's episode is also brought to you by Randmar Corporation. Randmar Corporation has been serving central Vermont and surrounding areas with excavation, construction, and real estate services since 1979. They are a locally family-owned company committed to the values of Vermont. Contact Randmar Corporation today for all of your contracting and real estate needs. Back to you, Guy.
Okay, and big shout out to 802 Scoop for letting us use this terrific studio.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, Rebecca Petre of Waterville said, Guy, I love the new studio, love the show. Get rid of that big chair you're sitting in. It makes you look like, who's the character on Lily Tomlin, the little girl that she used to play on Laugh-In, which of course dates both Rebecca and I. So anyway, we did. We got rid of the big chair, and now I'm sitting in the little chair, and I hope it works better. Let me know. But anyway, thank you very much to 802 Scoop and Raylene Meunier for letting us use this place. So some of the other things that have come up, Paul, you don't know this, but I was working out at the gym the other day, and there was a young man with a Northfield Construction t-shirt on, working out, wearing a Good Measure Bar and Grill hat.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, perceptive me, I bet you're from Northfield. And he says, I sure am. He says, aren't you that guy who's on that podcast with Paul Bean? I said, yeah, that's me. And it was your buddy Jackson.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Jackson Clayton.
Yeah, he's very proud of you. He said when the night you ran and almost won the Senate election, at least finished best among the Republicans. You ran a really good race. He called you up and said, hey, buddy, really proud of you, especially for putting yourself out there. And you know what? I think that separates the winners from the losers, especially in politics, that they're willing to put themselves out there. A lot of folks will never run because they're afraid to lose because they don't want to make the effort. But I take my hat off, and I will, to anyone who runs for office.
Yeah.
Because what a lot of work. It's never guaranteed. And it takes a certain amount of just love and courage to do that, I think.
So, Guy, we do have a handful more comments. I know we have another thing we want to talk about today, but
comments an awful lot more important than anything else we're going to talk about. I think
we should keep it on this subject.
Yeah.
Let's just keep going here today. Marianne Doobie writes, I'm surprised everyone is aghast at Jay Rodgers' TDS blast. Phil is just like him. He will not have my vote if that matters. So here's what I'll say to that, and maybe I'll let
Actually, I want to say
Go ahead.
First of all, Marianne, thank you. Thank you, Marianne, for commenting on that. Marianne, I'm see if I can get my family connections right, is the sister-in-law of one of our great lieutenant governors.
Wow, that's actually kind of funny, yeah.
Brian Doobie.
Yeah.
Brian Doobie, who came so close to winning the governor's race. I think it was 2012, and Peter Shumlin pulled that Vermont Yankee scare on everyone in October. And oh no, the tritium's in the water and it's going to glow and everything. And he won. He came from behind and he beat Brian Doobie just barely. But Brian was a fantastic lieutenant governor, and a lot of people think, boy, those were the days. But anyway, to her point, the TDS, for those of you who don't know, Paul, would you mind translating TDS for us?
Yeah, Trump derangement syndrome.
Yes.
You know, and it's actually that Trump derangement syndrome. My perception of what it is it's not necessarily maybe it's a mental disease partially, but that's maybe a little harsh. It's more of a programming, in my opinion. And the type of people that have this programming are the type of people that consume a lot of mainstream news and media.
But we're part of the Trump cult.
Well, we are part.
We
of
are
Trump.
told.
Of course, we are. No, just kidding. We're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
No.
that's the thing is like again, like I guess I never want to be in a position again where I feel like I'm supposed to be on this person's side or not.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and whether it's
too.
Rodgers, whether it's Donald Trump, we have to be willing to be critical and try
Yeah.
to look at these issues right down the middle. You know, I have issues with. That's the other thing. So I have issues with the stuff the Trump administration
Yep.
is up to. I have problems with some things that they've been doing, and we can talk about that. But I just think the way that you just went about it, it was so destructive to the VTGOP. That's what upsets me more than anything. So, and I look at it, like I say, it's more of a programming, right? It's a programming, and what you just did, John, is you reinforced that programming for all of those people that are so full of fear, anger, anxiety, and rage, really. And that's what I just can't wrap my head around. And that's why I call it programming, because how easy they're able to just like take out the chip and place in the new one, right? Oh, everyone, put the chip in your brain. Here it is. You're all upset at that about cost of living now in Vermont, but it's not the legislature's fault.
Right.
It's Donald Trump's fault.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It makes no sense.
The cost of eggs. Right.
Yeah,
it's Donald Trump's fault.
It's not Joe Biden's, who was president for the last 4 years.
Yeah, that's right. And that's so true. I mean, the cost of everything in Vermont can so much be traced to legislative government policies that consistently say, no, you can't build it. It will take you forever. We're going to tax you to death. We're going to regulate you to death on anything it is you try to do. And oh, by the way, we're also going to enable entire generations of populations into poverty and reliance on the government. So you have those two things, and you're going to have a high cost of living. Well,
and that's just it. It's like they're not upset at the people. This is a tweet I posted. It's something like this, and it did a lot of numbers on X, and it was something like they're mad at the wrong people, essentially. And you know, we can talk all day about the cost of living. We can talk all day about all that stuff. But if you're not going to look at the root cause of the problem,
Right.
then you don't actually care. You just want
Right.
something to be upset about. Instead of being upset at Donald Trump, who was just elected, like literally inaugurated less than 2 months ago, or I guess it's more than that now. But instead of being mad at Donald Trump, why aren't you mad at the legislators like Bernie Sanders, Peter Welch, now Becca Balint, Patrick Leahy, my cousin Patrick Leahy.
Okay.
Anyone out there, you can check me on that. But why aren't you mad at Patrick Leahy and all of these people who have been building a system here in Vermont that is genuinely unsustainable, right? And is dependent on federal dollars. Meanwhile, Main Street has been extracted from the United States,
Sure.
right, John? And it's been placed in countries like China, Vietnam, India.
Hey, we're in Barrie, which, by the way, the Main Street in Barrie has a lot of gaps in its teeth, you know, a lot of just empty storefronts. And what's the big industry of Barrie?
Granite.
Granite. Where is a ton of the world's granite production happening?
China.
China.
Yeah.
That's right. So there are Chinese, the granite industry here are saying, the people making the granite are saying, why are you using Chinese granite to make your monuments? Use our Barrie granite. but because of the trade policies, some of the actual makers of granite stones and monuments are using cheaper Chinese granite and marble.
And that's what bothers me the most about what John's been saying too, is, and I probably said it bothers me the most 5 times. That's something that bothers me a lot about what John said too, is because of all the conversations that I've had with him on my podcast about how we export a lot of our pain to foreign nations where there's no environmental standards,
Right.
there's no regulation of child and slave labor, like in the Congo where all of our lithium comes from. You had a video that went viral and you're talking about that and how it's a problem. Maybe we should address that. Maybe we should stop.
How about concentration camps in China full of religions that are out of favor?
That's a great point.
And they're doing the labor over there.
And I think that's what I'm getting at, though, is like, he and I have talked about in the lieutenant governor's office cheap Chinese solar panels and how we don't want to be dependent on them. That's all these tariffs are designed to do, and that's the reality, right? And these tariffs, to call them a tariff might not even be the right word. It should just be the standard, maybe, because the reality is that you look at all these other countries, they have these tariffs on us. We can't do business in China.
That's why they're called reciprocal.
That's why they're called reciprocal.
Yeah, that's right.
All we're doing is what they're doing.
We should probably take either some more comments or go to another ad.
One more ad. This is our final one. We'll take some more comments, and then we'll talk a little bit more on that. What do you think? What do you think? Okay. Okay, folks. Today's episode is also brought to you by One Day in July. As financial advisors, One Day in July provides personalized investment management and financial advice to individuals, families, and institutions. They work with clients to understand their financial goals and build investment solutions. They are fiduciaries on all accounts for all clients. Man, would I love to hear what he has to say.
I bet he's had a very interesting, busy week.
Yes. Dealing
with all of this, with the ups and downs of the stock market and the impacts of the tariffs. Probably everyone's calling him saying, hey, what should we do? That's Dan Cunningham, the founder and president of One Day in July we're talking about. So any more comments, Paul?
Yes, we do. We have L. Rainey writes, Lieutenant Governor John Rodgers just showed his true colors. He's not a Republican, and I hope the GOP gets busy and has a true Republican governor and lieutenant governor.
Boy, I'm thinking, I hope no one minds if I throw out a few names because it's just guy talking out loud, which means nothing. But I've always been a big admirer of a lady up in Milton, formerly of Rutland, named Wendy Wilton, who is so smart with money and just a great brain, really nice person, principles, sound Republican. I could see someone like Wendy, and I think she ran for statewide office once. She ran for treasurer, I think. I could definitely see that.
Paul Dame. Paul Dame.
It's a possibility. Yeah.
I think he'd make a great candidate.
He's our the executive director of the party, former Essex legislator. That's true. Thinking outside of the box. Tim just said Randy Brock, which is not really an outside of the box thing. I was actually his media director on one of his lieutenant governor campaigns. I guess I must not have done a very good job because he didn't win. But so I just wondered, like, if there's some good, business people. I'm not saying Dan Cunningham. Believe me, Dan, I'm not. But someone
like that. Sure.
Someone who's just, smart and personable and so well thought of. Someone like a Dan Cunningham coming out of nowhere saying, you know what, it's time to dedicate 2, 4, 6 years to public service. I think I'll do that.
We do have another comment here. This was from Michael Hall. Maybe this was in response to what I just said about Paul Dame. He says, one of the biggest problems in Vermont Republicans is that Paul Dame has done a poor job of recruiting and helping candidates to get elected. I ran against one of the most destructive candidates, Dick Sears, who misused his authority to interfere and cause problems for my campaign. When I complained to Paul, he wasn't interested in exposing him for what he was up to. He ended up winning. I got zero assistance from Paul Dame and the VTGOP.
This has been a complaint, rightly or wrongly, about the Vermont GOP, is that it seems like some counties get a lot of help. Maybe they're sort of picked as, we think we can win here, we have limited resources, we're going to focus here. In other counties, you got candidates who are working hard, they're earnest, they're really good candidates, but they're up against strong incumbents, and they have a tough time winning, and do not get much in the way of resources, of mostly of money. So
there's definitely some concerns there. I get it, but I'll push back a bit and defend Paul. I think somebody you and I both know, working in conservative world in Vermont is probably the most difficult path you could take. So Paul has like no resources. I don't agree with everything he's done and said. I don't think he definitely doesn't agree with everything I do and say, and he'd tell me that too.
What happened November 5th here?
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And who was the executive
Paul Dame
director?
was.
It was Paul Dame.
Yeah.
So you got to give him some credit there.
You do.
And although I will say, we need, if we had more candidates like Michael Hall, people who are out there who's spent his whole life in, a lot of it in law enforcement, and has decided, look, it's for the good of the state, I'm going to run. We need more like him.
I agree. I think there's going to be some people that come out of the woodwork. I don't think you're going to stop seeing this momentum in Vermont for a red wave. I think John definitely just poked a major hole from the RNC's perspective in fundraising for Republicans. I might know that for a fact, right? Might know that for a fact. But that doesn't mean it's over. That doesn't mean it's over. So was that his intention? Was that somebody else's intention?
Oh, are you saying that the national RNCs may be a little less interested in Vermont now because of that? Is that
I
what you're
think
saying?
they might be like, what the heck is that? What's this all about? And I mean, look,
I hadn't thought about that, Paul.
And look, we've gotten through all our ads today. So, or no, we have one more.
We
ad.
have not.
We have one more ad. So
we sure do.
We should do it real quick before we
Yeah.
talk about that, because I want to make sure we do mention this today.
Yeah.
But today's episode is brought to you by Perro's Gun Shop. Perro's Gun Shop, nestled in Waterbury, Vermont. Explore an unparalleled selection of firearms complemented by their exclusive indoor firearm range, the one of only kind in Vermont. Elevate your skills with our comprehensive professional training classes tailored to every level of expertise. At Perro's, they're dedicated to providing exceptional service and expertise for all of your firearms needs. And of course, here's a couple photos of Guy Page and I shooting it up.
That was so much fun.
Guy, I actually got a really funny comment from somebody yesterday, and I maybe it was Dexter LaFavor who said this to me. He goes, maybe it wasn't him, it was somebody. They said, I got a real big kick out of those photos of you and Guy shooting those guns. And I said, oh, why is that? It's like, because they said, because that's like Guy's way of giving people the finger. That's like the closest thing Guy Page is going to do to give people the finger.
Well, certainly a member of my family took it that way.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't the intent. I was just having fun, man. A lot of what we do in life that people are is really just about us having fun.
It's true.
And that's the American way.
It is.
So, any more comments before we...
We do have another comment. Kevin Ryan says, we picked up 20 legislative seats in Vermont out of 42 nationwide.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul Dame.
Yes.
That's a pretty big deal. Vion LeBlanc writes, Rodgers is a disappointment. He shot himself in the foot. He's not a true Republican. And I hope he is out come primary season. I haven't heard everything. Does Rodgers also support DEI in Vermont schools? Donald LeBlanc. So that's where I was going to go with this. Where are the administration, the RNC, where are they looking at things? I can say on pretty good authority at this point that I know for a fact people at the White House are looking at DEI in Vermont. So throwing that out there.
And we have, that's very interesting, Paul. And we have, I think just today, I got a press release from Secretary Saunders, Education Secretary Saunders, saying Vermont is completely compliant with all DEI regulations. Even though most people would look at our schools and say, really?
I mean, I
don't think so.
I get messages from people and parents and things all the time. People saying, like, I want to pull my kid from school, but they can't because they need to work. Both the parents need to
Right.
work because the cost of living in Vermont is so high.
Right. Yeah.
So then they have to go to the DEI indoctrination camps
Yep.
where their kid is being pummeled with. I mean, look, I hear stories all the time, and I mean, go pick a school in Vermont. Pick a school,
Yep.
and tell me if you see evidence of DEI.
Right.
And I'm not just talking about. I'm gonna push a little bit and say I'm more talking about the middle schools and high schools.
Mm-hmm.
I'll defend the elementary schools a little bit, but I've heard things about elementary schools as well.
Right.
And even something that happened down in Danville the other day, which I don't have the full story on yet, so I shouldn't say too much. But if anyone does, feel free to reach out to us because I've had a couple people say some things. So I guess what I'm getting at is, like, I think people in Vermont, we like to believe that we're out here in the hills and people don't notice us up here and we're just doing our own little thing in rural Vermont. Nobody's watching us. We can do whatever we want, right? You should have learned that wasn't true when J.D. Vance came here. First of all, you think they're not paying attention to what's happening in Vermont, where Bernie Sanders is from?
Oh, and by the way, one of the ways that Vermont's getting attention is Vermont Daily Chronicle is now on the White House press pool list. We're getting all of the press pool reports of blow by blow quotes of what's said in the cabinet meetings, in the press conferences, everything. And just today, for the first time, I published sort of and I hope to write a more or less daily list of this is what we are hearing right from the horse's mouth from what's happening in the White House.
It's fun too.
Yeah,
It's
and
kind
I
of
think
fun.
that was a lot of it was your work, Paul, with the J.D. Vance thing.
Thank you.
Is that we sort of got on their radar screen a little bit, and
I think we were beforehand, Guy. I really
Maybe.
do.
Yeah.
I think there's more to it than meets the eye. But the reality is we know for a fact that there's some movement there, and we're not being paid attention to. Vermont would be the easiest place to make an example of. And you know, let me be very clear. Do I want people in Vermont to suffer? Do I want people here to hurt? No, I don't.
of course not.
But I think it just might be the case that some of us, we're going to have to rip off the Band-Aid and we're going to have to address some things about our state that we don't want to. We don't want to talk about certain things, but we're going to have to. It's going to be painful. It is going to be painful. It already has been with the schools and the conversations there. I know we're trying to end the show here, but I think about closing my high school, right? To think about closing my high school in Northfield makes me want to cry.
Wow.
You know, I had all my family went there, all generations.
Yep.
But hey, look, again, back to that point about the decline of the U.S. My whole life I've seen enrollment get smaller and smaller. I've seen sports teams get smaller and smaller. Again, businesses moving out. These are all very interrelated issues, folks. This school thing too. And I don't think people they're not seeing it. It's all connected, but you guys are totally missing the ball. So.
Would your kids go to U32, where if Northfield High closed?
Well, you'd go to Northfield High School. But if Northfield closed, I don't think Northfield will close at this point. I think they're going to pass the school
But say
budget.
they did. Where do kids in
I
Northfield?
think they would end up going to either Williamstown, but I think they're part of the same district. I think everybody would end up going to U32.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know, but that would be interesting to find out. But I guess the big point that I'm trying to make, though, is like, there's going to be some changes coming here, folks. They're not going to ignore what's happening here. I know they're not going to. They're just waiting for the opportune time. If Vermont loses $100 million in education funding, for example, right, and we'd have to get in the specifics of that. I asked some questions to somebody yesterday, and he was kind of like, well, what are you talking about? You know, what money? And that's a fair question. But if we did lose money at all, would that mean schools would have to go and revote on their budgets? Would we have to, what would that look like?
Yeah.
How bad would it get? So,
Right.
curious
Good
to see how
point.
it happened.
Good
But
point. Well, thanks, Paul. Another good show. And folks, thank you for all your comments. This is, I think, the most comments we've ever had on the show. So, and the greatest number of people. And I just want to see this. Frankly, if you heard a lot less from us and a lot more from you, that's one of the reasons that Vermont Daily Chronicle succeeds, is because it has comments. And bring it on. So we'll see you. Have a great weekend, everyone. And we will see you next Friday at 4.